In today's Eco News we have the UK has approved the first new coal mine in 30 years. The UK government has blocked the release of CO2 figures behind the transport plan. News that UK energy customers have saved more than $3 million by using high energy appliances at off-peak times. And finally, a study has revealed that earthworms in the UK may have declined by up to a third. Hi folks, G3 here. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of Eco News. First this week, it's an article from EcoWatch, and it's the UK has approved the first new coal mine in 30 years. So Olivia Razan is reporting here and saying that the UK has approved its first new coal mine in 30 years against the counsel of the government's own climate advisors. The Secretary for State for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities, Michael Gove, he gave his approval on Wednesday for a coal mine in Whitehaven in Cumbria that would cost £165 million. They're saying it would generate around 500 new jobs in the region, produce 2.8 million tonnes of coking coal a year, which is for steel production, and it would send 40,000 tonnes of climate heating emissions into the atmosphere each year. This is according to The Guardian. They're saying, given the nature of the climate emergency that we're all faced with, the decision to go ahead with a new coal mine in Cumbria is an incomprehensible act of self-harm, according to Sir David King, who is the founder and chair of the Climate Advisory Group. And this is an international body of climate experts. Now, he said that the action by a leading developed economy sets exactly the wrong example to the rest of the world. Now, the UK has tried to position itself as a global climate leader after it hosted the COP26 UN Climate Conference. Now, this was in Glasgow in 2021. The Woodhouse Colliery, which would be run by the West Cumbria Mining, and that was first proposed in 2014. Now, it was approved by local authorities in 2020 and the national government in 2021, but the government actually went back on its approval as the country was preparing to host COP26. Because obviously it was hosting COP26, it silenced this and disapproved it at the time. But now that that's well in the past, it's got approval. The UK COP's president, Alok Sharma, has opposed the decision to greenlight the mine, which you would expect. He's saying, over the past 3 years, the UK has sought to persuade other nations to consign coal to history because we are fighting to limit global warming to 1.5 Celsius, and that coal is the most polluting energy source. Now, he's saying the proposed mine will have no impact on reducing energy bills or ensuring our energy security. Now, the reason for this is that coal will not be mined for fuel. Instead, it's going to be used to make steel. Now, in Gove's approval letter, he said that the mining of the coal itself and its use in steel making would have an overall or broadly neutral effect on worldwide greenhouse gas emissions. And the government further argued that the mine did not violate its commitment to be net zero by 2050 because it would shutter it by 2049. And this seems to me to be extremely short-sighted, and they are just being creative with wording to make sure that their approval fits within their agreements that they've got in place at the moment, and it seems extremely shoddy to me. Now, the UK's Advisory Climate Change Committee said the mine would increase the country's carbon dioxide emissions by 400,000 tonnes a year, and they've said that 85% of the coal would need to be exported. Now, the reason for this is British Steel has said that the Cumbria mine's coal will have too much sulphur for it to use, and also Tata Steel said it might use some of the coal before switching to more climate-friendly steel-making methods over the next 10 years. So 85% of the coal is going to be exported anyway. Ludicrous. There is still a chance that the mine could be blocked. The non-profit Client Earth is investigating a legal challenge at the moment. So there we go, folks. News that the UK has approved its first new coal mine in 30 years. An extremely backward step that seems to be flying in the face of what was agreed at the COP26 summit in 2021. Okay, next up we've got an article from The Guardian. The Department for Transport has refused to publish emission figures which campaigners say could make new road projects unviable. Now they're saying it includes data on how much car use would have to be reduced in order to reach net zero commitments. Now the campaigners say meeting these legally binding targets will be possible only with a drastic reduction in motor traffic, which could make many of the new road projects financially unviable. Now this article goes on to say that scientists say a shift to electric vehicles alone is not enough and that car use needs to be drastically reduced in order to meet net zero targets. Professor Greg Marsden of the University of Leeds has said that the figures showed the sector breaching carbon targets and not meeting its own carbon reduction plans. Now he's submitted a complaint to the Information Commissioner's Office demanding that figures be released. And scientists are saying that a shift to electric vehicles alone is not enough and that car use needs to be drastically reduced in order to meet net zero targets. The Information Commissioner's Office has agreed with Marsden, ruling the Commissioner considers that there's a very strong public interest in publication of the data that will assist the public in understanding policy decisions. And they say disclosure will help the public to understand where the government's proposals are too ambitious, not ambitious enough, or about right. However, the Department for Transport has appealed against that ruling and they've claimed that it does not have to submit its workings on the decarbonisation plan as it is a live policy. Ralph Smythe from the Transport Action Network has said, "We think this is because already a lot of the big road schemes are not showing value for money." The Climate Change Committee has argued that the government has not factored a reduction in traffic growth into its net zero plans. Instead, it's relying on changes in technology such as a switch to electric cars. A Department for Transport spokesman declined to disclose the figures to The Guardian, and they said the department has a clear plan to reach net zero as set out in last year's Transport Decarbonisation Plan. This sets out an ambitious and credible pathway to reducing transport emissions, including through electric vehicles and increasing use of public transport and active travel. Well, it seems to me that there is a little bit of pulling the cotton wool over the eyes from the government with this. They're trying to hide these figures, which really I think are in the public interest and should be released, but they are trying to battle it at the moment because clearly it's going to be demonstrating something they don't want to be released. So it's not good news in my opinion. Next up, it's another article from EcoWatch, and this is that UK energy customers have saved more than $3 million by using high-energy appliances at off-peak times. Now, EcoWatch are saying that in an effort to stop power shortages this winter, more than 1 million households and businesses in Britain are taking advantage of a national grid programme called Demand Flexibility Service. Now, this pays customers who turn off high-energy appliances like dishwashers and ovens during specific peak times. According to the National Grid, since its launch last month, the programme has reduced electricity demand by more than 780 megawatt hours over the 5 test periods. Now this demand flexibility service, it's the first of its kind and it's a smart way for signed up consumers in homes and businesses to save money. But Jake Rigg, who's the Director of Corporate Affairs for the Electricity System Operator, said that if you put your washing machine or other electrical appliances on at night instead of the peak in the early evening, you can get some money back when we all need it. Notice of 24 hours is given to customers to adjust their electricity use to an off-peak time. Now the peak times are usually from 4 till 7 p.m. Now the energy providers then give credits back to customers on their bill. So obviously this is a really great idea. People are using their appliances at off-peak time and getting a little bit of money back. So it's helping to reduce the strain on the grid at peak times. Now, there's a bit of news here about power and gas prices being lower this week, and also the gas price projections for next month have also fallen by 5.6% in the UK. A surge in nuclear power in France and hydroelectric output being up in southern parts of Europe has eased the strain on northern Europe's electricity reserves. Now they're saying here that the cost of electricity for delivery was about 5% lower in France and 7% lower in Germany this week. They're also reporting here that the power crunch was exacerbated by low winds, resulting in almost no output by wind farms. farms. But this has changed by Wednesday of this week, with wind making up 27% of power generation in the UK. Nuclear sources contributed 13%, while gas was making up almost half at 47%. So we can see that there are constant changes in the mix of power that is available within the UK. And at the moment it was wind, nuclear and gas that was providing the mix. I think it's a really good idea to reduce the strain on the grid at peak times by encouraging households to use some of their high energy appliances outside of those peak times, by giving them that little bit of a financial incentive on their bills. So it'll be interesting to see how much more take-up there is of that. It seems that the trial has been run on 5 separate occasions so far. I think with these results that's probably going to be rolled out to maybe a wider audience. So good news. The final piece of news I've got for you is from The Guardian, and it's rather concerning. They're reporting that earthworms may have declined by 1/3 in the UK, according to a recent study. They're saying here that populations of earthworms in the UK may have fallen by about 1/3 in the past 25 years. Now, researchers have collated data from more than 100 different smaller studies ranging from 1928 to 2018. So it's quite a wide period of time that this data has been collected from, and they have estimated a decline in earthworm abundance of between 33 and 41% in the last quarter of a century, which is huge. And Professor James Pearce-Higgins, who's a Director of Science at the British Trust for Ornithology, which has conducted the research, said a large-scale decline in soil biodiversity, particularly the loss of earthworms, would sit alongside concerns about Insectageddon and the wider biodiversity crisis. It would have widespread impacts on the species that feed on soil invertebrates, like birds, but also affect soil processing and nutrient cycling, the whole functioning of our ecosystems. Thrushes, starlings and many waders that rely on soil invertebrates are in long-term decline. And now these declines are greatest in southeast England, where hotter, drier summers may also reduce the availability of earthworms to foraging birds. Now, Dr. Barnes, also at the BTO, said there was a good reason to expect declines in earthworms on farmland. They're saying changes in the UK countryside over the last century, such as extensive drainage, pesticide use and inorganic fertilizer application, are likely to have negatively affected earthworm populations. Pearce-Higgins said that the team hoped that the study would prompt further investigations and the establishment of proper monitoring. So clearly this is really concerning news. The data has been collected over quite a long period of time from totally unrelated studies, but there's got a lot of data that can be utilised by the BTO to work on this research. And they have come to this conclusion that there does appear to be a significant decline in earthworm populations, which is really concerning because, as they say, it does have a knock-on effect on the wider nature community. So obviously it's all to do with changes in the soil structure and also creatures that are feeding on earthworms that are within soil. So a really concerning piece of news. There you go, folks. That's this week's episode of Eco News. Up next, another video that I think you'll find useful, and if you haven't done so already, then please subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye!